Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. So today's episode is with Travis Steffen, a marketer. He's got MBAs, PhDs. He's exited 8 companies. He's got a lot of smart stuff to say for the audience of entrepreneurs and business owners who are really trying to scale their business. But I've had people ask me, like, when are you going to start talking about AI and ChatGPT? So Travis has a new venture he's getting ready to launch. And he's all of the things that he has in his head, that he understands how to scale a business and how to grow something quickly. He's building this out in AI for the entrepreneur who is at the early stages, right? The guys that's bootstrapping, the gal that's bootstrapping their business that doesn't have a VC-backed PE person like giving them money. So he's taken these people that are in Silicon Valley, all of the growth knowledge that they have, what we do to research, make sure that we have the right avatar and our product matches up, to be able to take that and use the artificial intelligence to be that employee for you. And you never lose that employee. They never get tired. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for a really interesting episode of Sales and Cigars. So Travis, appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to jump on Sales and Cigars. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Been looking forward to this conversation because when you look at your website and you look at your LinkedIn profile, I don't do a lot of research because I like to have fun with the discovery process, but you've got some interesting conversation points I think that entrepreneurs, business owners are going to appreciate. So looking forward to the conversation. But let's start with how you got to where you are. Like, let's talk about your journey a little bit.
Great question. Yeah.
8 exits, like, go where you want to go.
Grew up in Iowa, very farmer factory, very blue collar, probably lower to lower middle class. Not a lot of money, but thankfully I was blessed with 2 wonderful parents that really cared and wanted to get me involved with as much as I could. And they were always incredibly supportive and, at times sacrificed their dreams for mine. That was incredible. Could not have asked for anything better.
Awesome.
And, ended up growing up in a kind of society, though, that was very hyper masculine at the time. So being intelligent and smart or anything like that was not socially rewarded. It was all being strong and athletic and so forth. So got more into that, went to college to play football, and popped my Achilles tendon 2.5 years in. There was no plan B. Had to make up plan B on the fly. Plan B looked like becoming a professional MMA fighter and becoming a professional online poker player. What I realized after a few years is while the money was good in online poker and while it was really exciting to fight professionally, wasn't really doing anything for the world. There was nothing that I was contributing to basically anyone around me in any way, in terms of the value I was offering to the world. I was getting punched in the face for a living or trading money with a bunch of other nerds on the internet. And that was what it looked like, right?
Was that part of your upbringing? Like, you had strong parents, there were people that cared about you and sacrificed. Was that like give back to the world, do something positive? Was that part of that?
It really wasn't, to be honest with you. Like, my folks were both very blue collar. It was, you go work for a living, you come home, you relax, you have fun with friends and family, and then you go do it again the next day. And there wasn't a ton in terms of charity or social good or anything like that because people were just trying to survive. So there wasn't a lot of time to focus on giving back to others beyond just, a couple times a year we would go volunteer, we would go do certain things that you might do in your community, and did the same thing for friends and family that needed help. Always did that because that was just kind of the Midwestern way of doing things. And I more so, got done with grad school and realized, wow, like, if we're thinking about legacy, if we're thinking about if people will remember me, what will they remember me for? And, you see a lot of athletes leave the spotlight and you never really hear from them again. You always wonder, what are they doing now? Like, et cetera. And I'm sure they're also wondering the same thing in a lot of cases. And with a lot of professional poker players, it's, you're sitting at a table looking at other people trading little tokens back and forth, in the form of chips. Yep. And that's basically it. When you're gone, you're gone. So I got obsessed in my early 20s with the thought of legacy, and I've kind of more so backed off of that now. But at the time, that suddenly became a very, very big and important thing for me, especially right when I finished my first graduate degree. I was suddenly an adult out in the world and realizing that I don't think I was proud of the contributions I was making to the world around me. So I don't exactly remember where that came from, if it was a book I read, conversation I had, podcast I listened to, or what. But this was many, many years ago now. And that's when I withdrew some of my bankroll from Full Tilt Poker and decided to start my first company. That looked like I was in mixed martial arts very deeply at the time. I had been boxing since I was 12 years old, and then made the switch over to MMA, moved to Thailand, fought over there, came home, and realized I want to still be involved in the sport, but I don't necessarily want to be a fighter anymore. Like, this doesn't feel like purpose to me anymore. It was interesting, it was fun, but it was more so. If we think about how Tony Hsieh used to describe the various forms of happiness in his book, Delivering Happiness, he described them as like the lowest form was pleasure, which was fleeting. The next one up is passion, right? It's a little bit less fleeting, but still is. And then the top one is purpose. And purpose doesn't always feel great every day, but it is something that almost drives you out of bed in the morning. And even on the days that aren't great, you're still moving, almost like a marionette puppet, because you know that you're aligned with what purpose you have to fulfill in the time that you have. And I didn't have an answer to either of those top level areas, right? I had a little bit of passion for some of the things that I was doing, but that was starting to wane, and I didn't have a ton of direction after that. So that first business was just a new challenge. Intellectually, it challenged me. It challenged me to learn all sorts of different things, and I was very much a self-starter. I couldn't hold a job longer than a day. I didn't respect the people I was working for, so I realized I would have to do something on my own. And so over the course of 14 years, took a number of big swings and struck out sometimes. Sometimes they worked out. Over the course of time, was able to realize more and more fundamental truths overall about different types of companies, gained more and more competency. Eventually, between exit 7 and 8, did get an MBA. So I was able to fill in a few remaining knowledge gaps there. And then fast forward to today, did just have my most recent exit last year in February, when we sold GrowFlow to Dama Financial for just shy of $70 million. And then now I'm building a new one. Am currently in a doctoral program trying to fill in any other knowledge gaps that I haven't been able to do in an autodidactical way. And it's just been a really fun ride.
So you haven't really accomplished much in the last decade, then.
It's
looking at stuff.
There are fun highlights to share, for sure. The ones that you don't necessarily see on LinkedIn are the ones that didn't work out, or the ones that did exit, and those exits weren't exactly what they appeared to be on paper, and the way that those always happen. So it's definitely been a roller coaster, just like any other entrepreneur's journey often is. But thankfully, I have been able to take more swings, so that's been lovely.
You said a couple of things there that I really want to dig into. One, the experience, learning things the hard way. I'm a blue collar kid myself, and it was a similar upbringing, like not farms, but auto industry outside of Detroit. But there's certain things that sticks with you, right? And I did the rocking chair test. It came from a book I read, what the hell are you doing, right? And
Sure.
What is that going to mean when you're sitting on the rocking chair, smoking, in my case, smoking a cigar when you're 85 years old? And that desire, right? That, what is it that's really driving you where you're going to leave behind? Those are things that I don't think people ponder enough in our careers, and especially in our entrepreneurial journey. But those things that occurred to you, I mean, we don't need to get into specifics of what went sideways, but there's a great quote from Oscar Wilde experience is the name I give to my mistakes. And I sort of add a corollary to that. Like, I'm a really experienced guy based on that quote, because I've made just about every mistake that you can make. And I haven't done a, 8-figure exit, but it it feels like I should have because of all the mistakes I've made. And I think that's the best lessons, right? You get an MBA, you get a doctoral, you get a PhD. Those are important things to, like you say, fill in gaps. But at those experiences, can you talk a little bit about how you weight that compared to an MBA or a PhD?
Yeah, so the experiences I would say have been far, far, far more valuable than academia. I think what academia has yielded are nuggets of wisdom, different ways of thinking about things, being more rigorous in research, things like that, in comparison to kind of some of the anecdotal or widely held truths that aren't necessarily backed by science. And if I, for example, am looking at just an evenly distributed swath of entrepreneurs that have the same experiences as me, I want an edge on those individuals as often as I can. And the biggest trend in entrepreneurship that I've witnessed in regards to education is most of them really poo-poo academia. It is overpriced, right? It is run by a lot of people who don't have experience as entrepreneurs. It's oftentimes outdated. All those things are true. But amidst all of that, there are still a lot of really great lessons to learn that wouldn't be learned in another setting that, I would normally be exposed to, and so would everyone else. And in so doing, the same is true for those that are deeper in academia, where they're not seeing things and making the connections in real time as rapidly as someone who is out in the field all the time. What I've found is these two worlds often mimic each other in the strangest of ways. If you go into an MBA program or a doctoral program, they're studying entrepreneurs out in the field. If you go to entrepreneurs out in the field every day, they're basically trying to get data that is of the quality and the certainty that's generated in scholarly research, right? So those two worlds do blend in non-intuitive ways, more so than a lot of people would like to admit. Now, if you're a bootstrapped entrepreneur, I wouldn't necessarily recommend going to academia as your first source because it's incredibly expensive and you could get a lot of the same knowledge taught in coursework just by reading books. And that is true. But oftentimes the way that that's positioned and the way that all of it's synthesized, and also especially like in a society that really highly weights, credentialism, things like the word doctor in front of your name, suddenly you're able to be prescriptive in your advice in a way that you otherwise couldn't be if you were just a deeply knowledgeable practitioner without those letters. We're kind of conditioned to be in this world where, let's say I have flu-like symptoms and I go into a doctor's office and the doctor, talks to me for 30 seconds, writes a prescription on the pad, says, go to the pharmacy and get this. I will go to the pharmacy and walk past 20 aisles of products full of things that would help me just as much. And I'm going to hand that to the pharmacist. I'm going to pay whatever they tell me to pay. And I'm going to do what that person says because of the fact that they're the most highly credentialed people in that field. And I have built-in trust. I'm conditioned to have that, right? That's also an additional benefit of academia that I don't think very many entrepreneurs try to go seek out.
Yeah, I think the entrepreneur takes that look at the guy or the gal with the white coat who's giving you the prescription, that they understand everything and that the prescription, right, those credentials are there. And I think the entrepreneur, as you say, that don't necessarily put the value on the education component for graduate school, they look at that doctor as like, yeah, but do you really understand the study that was used to create that drug, right? That put that drug out on the market. I mean, that's probably not the best example, but there's a higher level of skepticism, I think. But I understand your point that when you're sitting in a classroom, it's like sitting I was at an EO event yesterday. It was a learning day, right, where we're learning this topic. And it's sort of like a educational thing. But you get out of it what you take and what you put in. So if you're present, if you're paying attention, and you're looking for that edge, that, like you said, if you're looking for that little edge that's going to help you understand, it's like, oh, that is why, right? Whether it's a finance issue or a marketing issue or some sort of AI thing, you have to be there to see it. And you got to be willing to look a little deeper than just taking the notes to get past the test, right?
Absolutely agree.
And that's where the value would come out of it. Has gotten ridiculously expensive.
Totally. Yeah, I
And
couldn't agree more. I would love it to be a lot more approachable from a, and the funny thing is also with academia, the institution name I've found to be far, far less important unless you have something like a Harvard or a Yale or like an Ivy League. But the name of the institution almost doesn't matter as long as you have the letters, if that's what you're going for. If you're going through like for an additional level of social proof in what you're trying to do. So I think that
that
that's critical.
definitely for a PhD, it doesn't matter because you've demonstrated a certain level of commitment and understanding
Yep.
and pedigree. And I think even it was as undergrad, I went to University of Michigan, and my first job in New York City, they gave to me for two reasons. One, because somebody helped me get an interview, right? So that knowing somebody helped. But then they looked at where I went to school, and they made certain assumptions, right?
Right.
Michigan, Notre Dame, Stanford, Berkeley, those kind of schools, right, have outside of the Ivy League, those kind of have a different standard. But if somebody really wanted to look under the hood, as me as as a student, I wasn't a stellar student. I learned how to get what I wanted out of a system by going to college. I learned how to matriculate through a process that didn't make any sense. And I learned how to get along with people that were unreasonable. So,
Smart.
and my first semester was pretty bad, but after that, I kind of picked it up. But I think there's assumptions made in education that you got to go. I think you have to get the education and the credentials as we get to closer to the station of life where I am, where you're approaching. That really just is that. Like he's got to know what he's talking about. He's really filled in all the gaps, right? Because that's a great way to describe it. You've got all this experience, and then you go and like, oh yeah, now it's a completely solid mass of energy and knowledge now because
Right.
you filled that all in. We could go to the other thing you talked about was MMA and boxing, and people look at those folks and think about the last boxing match I went to watch was a Mayweather fight, so it's a while ago. But everybody was like, oh look, he made so much money in such a short period of time. And like, he's been working on that. I mean, the
Yeah,
last
his
three
entire
months of his
life.
life has been hell, but his whole life has been for those moments
Right.
in the ring. So it's to me, it's like it's that entrepreneurial journey, that educational journey. I mean, that is the culmination of all of those things to get to where you are. And I, hats off for it's a diverse
Thanks.
background and getting to where you are, and that has to inform what you're doing. So let's talk a little bit about marketing, because you have an offering for business owners and entrepreneurs, and you're working on a new project. So you choose where you want
Sure.
to go with that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've found to be true, most entrepreneurs will resonate with one core tenet that they have been fed for a long time, which is your success is going to be dependent largely on the caliber of your team, right? The problem is you can't really get high quality, high caliber talent if you don't have any money to pay them, or if you don't have compensation that would be worthwhile for them, right? And there are various folks within Silicon Valley and outside of it that are just way better at growing businesses than others, and they're paid accordingly. So unless you're willing to shell out $500,000 to $1 million a year for some of the world's top growth experts, you're going to have to use folks who are 10 to 20 to 30% as competent in every single one of those ways, unless you're able to find another path to that outcome. And until recently, that wasn't really possible unless you just spent a ton of time on education and learning yourself. You were able to architect other people to do the various other things that you would need to do as a founder so that you can focus almost exclusively on growth. What we're now attempting to do is recreate a top 0.1% Silicon Valley caliber VP of growth that you would normally only experience in a unicorn like billion-dollar company in Silicon Valley. And we're doing so with artificial intelligence. It's a very complex problem because of the fact that it's one of the more complex knowledge work jobs that there is. There are ways to kind of shortcut away to something that has maybe 20 to 30% efficacy, but we actually want it to be the best growth hacker on earth. And we want it to be approachable from a price perspective so that even entrepreneurs who are just getting started and only have a little bit of money to spend on it can get access to. We want it to be a core member of their team, so to speak. And we also want it to be, for lack of a better term, idiot proof. So effectively, you have to come on, answer some questions, and then follow directions, and you get all of the benefit that you would otherwise get if you had hired that person for a tremendous amount of money and gave them 6 months of ramp up time. So that's in essence what we're doing. It is inevitably called growthteam.ai. It is not live yet. We actually have an agency arm of the business where we have refined the methodology to the point where we're using the tools behind the scenes, but it's not really ready for the big time yet in terms of it being, commercially viable to use on your own. So we're in the process of doing so. But it is one of the more exciting things that I've ever worked on, in as much as I think that it could fundamentally change the way businesses are grown. And I haven't been able to say that about many other things that I've done.
Hey, thanks for being part of the Sales and Cigar community. I wanted to share that I wrote a book, The 7 Critical Mistakes CEOs Make with Their Sales Organization. The CEOs who've read it tell me I cut to the chase quickly, get to the point, explain exactly what they're experiencing, why they're experiencing it, and how to fix it. So if you want a free copy, go check out the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the interview. Oh, that's awesome, exciting, and incredibly interesting. So is there a timetable? Is that something people should just kind of keep their eye on?
Yeah, I would say we're looking to release the beta version this year. I'm hoping sooner rather than later. We're in the design phase right now of the consumer-facing tool. It will be functioning as a B2B SaaS platform. Largely won't be self-service in year one. You're still going to be working with us and the platform. So it'll definitely be like human in the loop and human supervised AI for a little bit. Because again, it is complex. We're doing a lot of different things that, if we were just doing one of them, it would be up in the world right now and probably generating revenue in that regard. But we actually elected to take a different approach. We didn't want to solve one problem at a time. We wanted to actually mimic the outcomes that the best growth experts in the world could generate. And we wanted to do that with AI. So we're working on it right now. You can still enjoy the outcomes of that by working with Growth Team, but the URL in the meantime is just mygrowthteam.com. You'll see my lovely face there. And that's in essence like what we're up to now.
Okay. So you're designing that for the entrepreneur who's been around for 3, 4, 5 years, kind of struggling to get to the next level and scale, or for the bootstrapper, or to the everybody in between?
Yeah, I think so. It's a no-no to say that it's for everyone. It's definitely not. Who we're targeting early on are subscription-based businesses specifically. In the near term, existing businesses with revenue would be the easiest, the ones that would get the fastest value. But by the release of the self-service arm of growthteam.ai, we actually want it to be for the bootstrapper specifically. Just because if you're a venture-backed founder, you're going to be able to get the benefit, but you're going to have a little bit of a lower burden in terms of just risk that you're personally carrying on your shoulders versus the bootstrap founder who's funding the entire business themselves, maybe has refinanced their home, maybe has taken out a loan, and that's all on their shoulders personally. So they have a larger amount of skin in the game themselves and a larger amount of risk that they're carrying to make the correct decisions always. And that's what we want to elicit, is just correct decision making 100% of the time, or at the closest closest to 100% of the time as possible.
All right, that's even more exciting because you're helping the people who really need the help.
Exactly. And that was our intention, right? Because if you're venture backed, oftentimes you can hire someone who has a ton of knowledge and experience.
Well, they're going to
Maybe not so
require
early,
it.
but
They're going to tell you who to go talk to my
right,
friend Peter over here. He knows what
right,
he's doing.
right.
So let's kind of like talk about that, but in a different way. Like for that growth, the growth person in the company, right? Because they can have lots of different titles. If they're thinking strategically, what are the things that at a high level, we don't need to go tactical, but at a high level, what do they need to be working on? And then is there an order of priority? If you're let's say you got a widget and you may be distributing the widget, you might be manufacturing the widget, but what do we need to work on first from a strategy point of view?
First things first. The first place we always look is we call the five fits, right? And it's market, model, channel, product, message. Bidirectionally, they all need to fit with each other. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in technology companies, talk about product market fit, always. And the unfortunate part of that term is it's become kind of a catch-all term for a condition that's a little bit murky and hard to pin down of, is this business capable of rapid growth? And like that becomes a really difficult question to answer over the course of various companies, because oftentimes like people are measuring product market fit in almost the exact same way as any other company is. And the problem with that is most companies are very different. The way that customers use those products are very different. The monetization is very different. Price points, natural usage frequency, all these things are very, very different. So if you give a benchmarkable mass market measure of like product market fit as if this company is primed for rapid growth if it hits this specific mark, and that's for all companies, it's really tricky to pin down if that's accurate or not. And unfortunately, that's really the only DIY solution founders have had for a long time on that side of things. So for us, what we look at are those 10 combinations of the five fits: market, model, channel, product, and message. Do they fit with each other? We have various niche exercises and lines of reasoning and questions and data that we're looking at to determine if that's the case. So those things, like for example, you can't craft a distribution channel around a product if you don't own that distribution channel. You can't influence Facebook to change to make it easily adopted by your product, right? But you can change your product and make it fit perfectly for that channel. So being able to go through that process and say, has this product specifically been developed to work with this specific channel? And if the answer is no, there's a problem there and we need to address it. Because oftentimes that'll speak to a problem where the founder just created a company, created a product and said, okay, this product has been created. How do we market it? And that's kind of backwards.
Yeah, I was gonna
Most
say
people don't realize that.
yeah, that is a backwards way of going about it. Like there's a problem out there, and maybe I develop a solution to it, and
Right.
that's a different approach to it. So what you're able to do is help them analyze the situation that they're in. I'm going real high level here, generalizing. But you
Sure.
help them figure out where they fit and where their issues are, and then you help them solve those problems.
That's one of the first things that we do, because I know the question you asked is like, what's the first thing that I'm going to focus on? And so the first thing we focus on is a diagnosis of those five fits. We want to make sure that those are present before we inject anything else, right? Outside of that, we do want a very rigorous avatar. I use one of the terms that I created building a couple of my last companies was the method. And this kind of speaks to method actors in Hollywood, like Daniel Day-Lewis, who will inhabit the body of the role he's playing for a year before he actually is in front of the camera. And we want to get to know customers on a cellular level to the degree that we can empathize with their exact situation and create conditions that will lead them to, all the way through the customer journey accordingly. So every single day we use those avatars. And the average entrepreneur, maybe if they work with a branding firm, they'll get a really pretty document with 4 avatars named different things with photos. And then they'll sit all day on the shelf and collect dust, and they'll go back to living their lives in the same way they would have and make the same decisions. So like most of the time people know the term like customer avatars, but they've spent very little time thinking about them. And what we do differently in that sense is every single thing that we do, we look to update that avatar document. So every experiment we run downstream, a foundational piece of our process is we're running experiments really rapidly, but in a really rigorous way, so we can learn from each success or failure, and then go back and iterate on that avatar and what makes those avatars think, feel, and behave the way they do. And that just serves to increase our win rate for experimentation really, really quickly. And the higher that average win rate goes, the higher the growth goes for that particular company, because the more things that we do resonate with them more often than not. So all of that is just like one cohesive and holistic system. Yes, we're going through 5 fits to create the conditions that allow for growth, but we're also then getting to know that customer so well. So not only are we solving the correct problem for them at the correct time in the correct way, but we're also speaking to them with the proper message in those moments in ways that will take them from one step to the next, and then from that step to the next, and so on and so forth.
And you can't do that until you understand who they are and who you're talking to, right? And that's a difficult thing for an entrepreneur to figure out. It sounds simple, but I mean, as you well know, that it's not, because we come to it with a set of biases about like what we think those people want, what we think our product is going to do or our service is going to provide. You really need that third party to kind of be like, nope, look over here, look over here. We're not sure. So
Yeah.
let's go run this research
Yep.
and experiments, as you said,
Yep.
to help that person dial that in. Is there?
Yeah.
Can we make a general statement that there's a vast number of entrepreneurs who that's one of their bigger issues, that they haven't matched that up as effectively as they should?
I have yet to meet a single client, regardless of their level of success, that we work with. And, we've worked with people who are, venture backed and pre-launch. So they're very early in their journey. And we also work with people who are, making tens of millions a year. I haven't seen a single one so far in my career that has been thinking as rigorously as the top growth leads in the world would actually think about these things in their business. Because one, they don't have the time, right? They don't have the time to pore over those numbers every single day, 24/7, 365, and make all the connections with everything else. They would get bogged down with data overload, and they wouldn't have time to do anything else in their business. But two, there's also often a knowledge gap, because this type of thing isn't really taught that frequently. It's taught in a few corners of the internet by a few of those top growth minds who have now branched out into education and things like that. For example, Brian Balfour, former VP of growth at HubSpot, has a really brilliant education company called Reforge. They typically work with the W-2 employees of big tech companies, and that's who they educate. Now, for the vast majority of other entrepreneurs, that doesn't describe them, right? For founders who are trying to learn how to do all these types of things, that doesn't describe them. And that company also is just education. Just because you know these things doesn't mean you personally have the bandwidth to go execute with excellence. And that's exactly what we wanted to try to, if everyone was well educated, that's a big if. But if everyone was well educated, there's still a gap on the actual implementation of that knowledge, in the same way that there would be, for example, if you look around me and you see all these books and you see all the other books in the room, there are tons more shelves here. The percentage of people who implement everything that they read in every book they read is basically zero. So that's effectively the gap that we wanted to help founders cross, which was not just the knowledge, but how can we instantly put this knowledge to work 24/7, 365 from an engine that doesn't sleep, doesn't need to take breaks, and just gets better at what they do over the course of time. And also, you'll never have a risk of churning that particular team member, quote unquote, out because they got a better offer elsewhere. Yeah. So that's what we wanted to try to solve.
You're not going to have a loyalty issue.
That's the hope, for sure.
Well, I was going to make a smart ass comment, like somebody should come up with an AI way to do all that, but I think you're onto a solution to many people's problems, and the method that you're choosing to deliver it, I'm really excited to see how that goes. You're going to have one of your biggest success stories, I think.
Right on.
Going forward.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, I wish you well, and I look forward to. I'm going to keep my eye on this. So the way I like to wrap these up, Travis, is curious if you have a relationship with cigars, past or present.
I actually do. So I'm not a smoker per se, like in terms of like a habitual cigar smoker. But my last company that we sold was a cannabis company. We actually were compliance, inventory management, point of sale software for licensed cannabis companies in the U.S. One of the things that I did early on in my career, one of the first years that I was ever in business, is I actually sat down and I bought 3 cigars. And one of them was, I will smoke this cigar when I'm making $500,000 a year. I'll smoke this second cigar when I'm making $1 million a year. And I'll smoke this third cigar when I have my own television show, for example. Like, I'll basically associate a cigar with a very large goal. I'll write it down on the cigar, not on the cigar itself, but on the tube, right? And I'll save it, and that'll be kind of my victory dance, in the same way as when, for anyone who's seen the original Independence Day movie, that was Will Smith's whole thing, was the cigar was his victory dance. And I think I saw that when I was younger, and I was like, I want one of those, right? So I do have a relationship, maybe not the traditional one, but that is what it is. It's effectively meant as like a large goal achievement victory dance.
I love that because there's two kinds of cigars. The celebratory one that you're talking about that Will Smith did Independence Day, and then the contemplative cigar. Where I take a journal and a pen and a cigar and go to a quiet spot and just, write, contemplate, think, be creative, whatever that moment needs. And it tactile area it tactily takes my hands and allows it sort of frees up my brain. But the celebratory aspect of it, that's awesome. I love that. That's a great way to end this.
Right on.
So, Travis, what's the best way for an entrepreneur to reach out to you? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, if you're wanting to grow faster, one of our core value promises right now is, for subscription-based business owners, double your growth rate in 90 days, or full refund plus $1,000 cash for wasting your time. Right? We wanted to make it really, really difficult to say no if you're a subscription-based business owner with existing revenue. So that you can find that at mygrowthteam.com. It's not going to be a sexy website at this point in time. It's our agency that we're using to refine the efficacy of the actual AI system that we're building behind the scenes. But outside of that, if you just want to hear about me talking about startups and business growth and company culture and hiring and so forth, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look up Travis Steffen, 2 F's, 2 E's. I'm the one that looks like a lumberjack. And then if you want to find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, it's just at Travis Steffen, Steffen. And I'm pretty active on both of those, most specifically Instagram.
All right. Well, we're going to have all those in the show notes, so for people to reach out. Exciting stuff, Travis. I wish you well, and thanks for taking the time. Hey, thank you for being part of the Sales and Cigars community. I want to take a quick second to share that I'm doing a free sales hiring challenge this month. I'm going to give you everything you need to hire sales superstars and avoid the sales duds. Check out the link in the show notes to be able to sign up for free.